Just sitting here by the river again today, thinking about all the choice points in my life that I've made that have brought me to this moment. And just kind of going back, like all the way through the years, small decisions, big decisions, and wondering, what my life would have looked like had one of those decisions been different. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Katie. I've been documenting my year of no plans since the 1st of January, 2026. And I basically left my 20-year career in hospitality to take some time off. I feel like I was living in burnout and I needed time to rest. I hadn't had time off for many years, and I needed time to rest. I needed time to really think about what it is that I wanted, because at multiple choice points in my life, I've felt that I wasn't on the right path. I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy. And so I made a decision, whether it was to move locations, whether it was to change jobs, whether it was to stay in a relationship, whether it was to leave a relationship. And through all those choices, I've made it to year 44. And my life today looks so different than I imagined it at 20. And I remember too being 20 and not knowing. I remember being 20 and trying to imagine my life and what it was going to look like and not being able to imagine it. It was just this blank canvas, this roadmap with no directions. And all I could base my decisions on were decisions other people had made before me. So people I knew who had worked for companies for 40 plus years, people who had decided to, most of the people I knew, settled down, bought houses, had kids, again, worked in jobs for 40 plus years, occasionally hearing about someone making a change, but not, it was more like, oh, they ran this bank and then they moved over to a different bank to run a different bank. So they were still working essentially the same job, just at a different location for a different company. And so I had no idea there was so much more out in the world until I started questioning and listening to this desire inside of me that was like, this isn't what I want. And it was hard at first. I grew up in Montana. It's beautiful here. As you can see, it's so peaceful. And even though it's so peaceful, it's so beautiful, I was feeling so constricted, so small. And, we studied history in high school and college and other cultures and other languages. And yet it's like I had no real clue about the world except from what I read in books. And sometimes it's easy to feel like what you're reading in a book is a fantasy. It's something made up. Because a lot of times they are like a story, or even some of the all of the histories are stories passed down generation to generation to generation. And until you really experience it, it's hard to grasp how big and different this world is. And so in my 20s, I had done a study abroad in Mexico. I did a study abroad in Rome first for about 3 weeks. A group of us from the university went to Rome with our professor, Linda Gillison. I still remember her. such a sweet lady, and she took quite a few of us. I want to say there was 18 of us to Rome for 3 weeks and showed us around all the beautiful churches and talked about the history and the Colosseum and really put a place with all this history that we were learning in books. And the people, actually seeing how people operated over there, how the culture, the food, all of it. And that kind of got me hooked. I ended up doing another study abroad in Mexico. Mexico was a bit longer. It was during the summer months, so I was there about 6 weeks, again through the University of Montana. And I started to really pick up the language. I started to really pick up Spanish, which was such a great feeling of accomplishment, and also being able to connect with people in their own language was just gratifying and beautiful, and it felt like you're becoming a part of the community because you could actually sit down and have a conversation with someone who maybe didn't speak English, but I could speak Spanish, so I could hear their stories and I could hear how they grew up and I could hear, how they ended up becoming who they are in this totally different country, this totally different place and lifestyle that we have from America. And so in my early 20s, just those 2 study abroads really started, that blank canvas started to have some waypoints on it. And the biggest thing I remember is like, how do I get there? Like, I want to live abroad. I want to actually learn from other cultures. I want to learn the languages. I want to live how they live. And throughout my entire life, I feel like I've just been trying to get to that place, to get to that point where I could, basically study other cultures and be a part of other places and communities and learn about them throughout my life. And then society and societal norms and what I should be doing as a woman, as a daughter, as a friend, as a sister, as, just living in this world. It felt like that was a hard road, and it was going to be too hard to do it. So I started to work after college. I was trying to find a job. I graduated with not a master's. I graduated with my bachelor's in forensic anthropology, and I thought for sure I was going to graduate college and have a job right away. Like, I had no clue how difficult it would be to get a job in your field of study. Because growing up, everyone said oh, you have to get a college degree to get a good job. You have to get a college degree to get a good job. Well, it takes a lot more than that. So and it was close to the economy having the housing collapse and all of that. So I was applying for jobs for years. And in the meantime, I started working. I was working as a bank teller for a while, and I was still working, and I was also a server, so working in hospitality, well, in both areas, I guess, guest service and hospitality, and then just living paycheck to paycheck, and thinking how do people survive? How do people save money and retire off of this amount of money? Because it was so little. And I was working 2 jobs, and I got it in my head that I didn't want to pay rent, so I ended up buying a house. And at the time, it was affordable for that time in my, that era, I want to say. And now, it just seems crazy that I ever sold it, because it was it was so affordable. But at the time, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I could barely, pay the mortgage and buy food and put gas in my car. And I was miserable. I was like, this is life. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do for the next, gosh, I'm like 25, so 40 years. Why was math so hard just now? I was like, really? This is what I'm supposed to do? I'm just going to live paycheck to paycheck. How am I going to travel? And I kept kind of going back to that pull, that desire, like, of missing travel and wanting to study other cultures and study abroad and live in different places and learn from different people and share it with the world, and so I ended up being miserable. And I tried, so, I thought, okay, like, I had a boyfriend at the time, I had several jobs, I was, living paycheck to paycheck, I had the 401k, and I tried to do it, I think for like 3-4 years. I was still applying for forensics jobs, I was volunteering for the police department, I was, what else was I doing? I think I was still volunteering at a church camp sometimes in the summer. Just doing all this work to get this job that I had gone to college for so I could make more money so that I wouldn't live paycheck to paycheck, so that I could actually do some traveling, on my 2-week vacation a year. And I did that for years, and I wasn't getting the job, and I was, I got my 2 weeks of vacation of the year, and, any little bit of money I had saved, like, was spent on the vacation, and then it was back home to the grind. And I was so sad. I remember just being so sad because I was like, is this really life? Is this what life is about? Like, you just work, sometimes 2-3 jobs, you volunteer, you do all these things trying to get ahead, and I felt more behind than I ever felt in my life. And I had a friend call me one day who was living in Jackson, Wyoming, and she said, "What are you doing these days? Like, how's life?" And I said, "I'm miserable." I was actually honest, because I feel like so many of us say, "Oh, I'm okay, I'm good, like, things are good." And we just brush all those, like, feelings of helplessness and hopelessness under the rug and just put the mask on and keep pretending that we're okay when we're not. And I didn't pretend. I was like, I'm miserable. Like, is this really what life's about? Is this really what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I'm just going to work until I'm dead, because what if I don't make it to retirement? What if I don't make it? And she was like, you know what? Why don't you come to Jackson for a winter and just work at the hotel, one of the hotels, in a restaurant, because I was already doing some service, and just hang out for the winter and ski and just, like, basically kind of reset. It was her way of, I could still make money, but I could reset my life, and I could get out of Montana and this rut that I had gotten into. So I did just that. I ended up selling that house, which is one of the worst decisions of my life. I wish I would have rented it, and I wanted to rent it. I had all intentions of renting it, but every time I talked to people who were not qualified to talk about rentals, told me I shouldn't do it. Told me that it would be trashed and it would be awful and I'd lose my ass in it, and I listened to them. I listened to the wrong people. I listened to the wrong advice, and so I sold that house. I moved to Jackson, and I essentially started over. I didn't have much money when I moved there. I started working at the Four Seasons, actually. I was working in banquets. I had one job, not 2 or 3 or 5, and I started to get really good at it and started to get a lot of shifts, and I worked all the time. Overtime. Anytime they had They needed someone to work. I was working. And it was great. I started making money. I was actually saving money. I enjoyed customer service, guest service, hospitality. I enjoyed serving. I got really good at it. I was really good at it. And then that winter went by, and I ended up well, when I left Montana, just so you know, like, I sold the house. I put my stuff in storage. I thought I was going to be back at the end of winter, and about halfway through winter, I was dating this guy, and I ended up breaking up with him because I felt like I had closed the chapter, and I just needed to leave it all behind. And so everyone that winter kept talking about travel. And I was like, what do you mean you guys travel? And they're like, yeah, you know, we have basically 2 months off a year, like in the spring and in the fall. And when we have those months off, we travel. And working for the Four Seasons, you get what's called comp nights. After a certain amount of years you work for them, you get so many comp nights, and you can use them at different resorts around the world based on availability. It's not always guaranteed, but it was such a cool perk. And I had met a guy, and he had comp nights. And so we planned a trip to Bali, and he had comp nights actually at both Four Seasons resorts, which was so cool. And then there was a couple weeks in between where we had no plans. So looking back on that trip was such a pivotal moment. I mean, looking back on moving to Jackson was such a pivotal moment because I surrounded myself with community of people who were working really hard. Like, we all worked so hard, but then we all traveled in the off season. And it's like, oh my God, I found my people, because I'd been wanting to travel ever since those study abroads. I was like, how do I get to these places in the world, if I can't even make enough money to pay for gas that month? So suddenly I found a way. I was working seasonally, getting enough time off between seasons to go on these epic adventures. And my first one was to Bali. And it was such a pivotal moment in my life. I got to see Bali culture. I got to eat food that I've never even heard of before. I went scuba diving and got my scuba diving certification, which totally changed the trajectory of my life. Eventually I did my dive master course and my scuba instructor course, and I did those in Thailand like a year later, maybe 2 years later. And so from there, thinking of that blank canvas again and thinking of those waypoints, it's like suddenly it's like, oh, this is how I can travel. This is how I can have enough time off, not 2 weeks off a year, but 8 weeks off a year, and be able to actually travel and actually spend time in a place and get to know the culture, get to know the people, and enough time to enjoy it. It's not just a week, 5-day vacation. You fly somewhere, you sit on the beach for 3 days, and then you go home. Like, it was actually like you got to be immersed. I mean, depending how you travel, I got to be immersed in the culture. And then again, with the scuba diving, it totally just redirected my life. And that next year, I stayed in Jackson, and I ended up working like 4 jobs. So once I became a scuba instructor, I was not only working at a restaurant. I think at one point I was working at 2 restaurants, and I was teaching people how to dive. So there's a place in Utah called the Crater, and it's this natural hot spring, but it's deep enough that you can go, and it meets the requirements. It's a deep enough dive. It meets the requirements of open water diving. So I was taking students down there to certify them in open water, and some students in advanced open water. So I was teaching diving. I was working a couple restaurants. I was doing all sorts of stuff. And it was great. it was so great. And then I was traveling in the off season. I was going to Thailand a lot. I was bringing people to Thailand. I was teaching people kind of how to travel in a way, like where to, giving recommendations, how to book the flight, where to book the flights to and from, where to stay, how to use the subway system, how to use the train, how to use the ferry systems. Like I was kind of this guide, essentially, this like leading trips, but very informal, just me and friends and some people that I knew through friends from Jackson and things like that. And it was great. However, I was so busy. So my off seasons kind of stopped being off seasons and traveling for fun, because now I was essentially working. I was going to Thailand and teaching diving for some of the shops. Well, not teaching diving for some of the shops, but I was like, again, like bringing people with me and taking people diving and showing them, all the things Thailand, and being like a guide. And so even though it was fun and it was so beautiful, it started to feel like work. It started to be, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. It took a lot. And I don't know what it is with that time in my life. I was just working so much. And again, since my off seasons were these trips and I was kind of guiding them, I kind of stopped having time off in a lot of ways. And then when it was on season and we were in the restaurants and again working like several restaurants, sometimes I was working a month straight. I remember one time, I think I worked like 32 days straight without a day off. And again, that little light in me was like, what am I doing? What is this really what life is about? Is this really you just work until you retire and then you finally get to like enjoy the trip? I stopped, and that's the hard part, is I stopped enjoying the place where I was living, and I stopped enjoying the travels I was making, because it started to turn into a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money. I was spending a lot of money. Even though I was like trying to make money, I was actually ending up spending probably more money than I was making. So that desire, that itch, that like something's got to change started coming on. And I had been toying with the notion of going into yachting, because I was like, okay, well, how can I like still make money but be like on the ocean or near the ocean and diving? Like, how can I combine my hospitality with my diving? And the answer was yachting. And this is where COVID hit. And I had already been planning my exit, but I could tell that I was kind of on the fence still. I was like, well, maybe next year. Well, maybe the year after that. I was getting like cold feet, like blowing up my life and changing everything, like this huge, this great life that I had built, even though it was now it went from filling my cup to draining my cup. It was still like this beautiful life I had built. So moving again and changing careers and essentially starting over was really scary. And I remember when COVID hit, it was just this like, okay, it's time. This is it. This is the sign or whatever you need to make this change. And it wasn't easy. I had a couple managers and a couple people I was close with. I was working two restaurant jobs, and they had known I was floating this idea of going into yachting and changing paths. And so when they finally were rehiring, because they laid everyone off, and when they were finally rehiring, I wasn't on the rehire list. And it was a gift to me, I feel. I look at it as a gift that it was them acknowledging that I had been talking about moving on to this other career. And so they didn't hire me back so that I could follow that path. However, it was so painful. And this is when you have those moments where I didn't realize for a couple years that I was grieving those jobs, and I was grieving that place, and I was grieving that life that I had meticulously built and loved for a really long time. And it was so hard because I would get emotional about talking to friends about the restaurants and what's going on back home and things like that. And even though I was starting this new awesome career in this amazing place, I ended up being in Bahamas the first 2 years of my yachting. And I was diving a lot, which was beautiful. And yet there was still this ache, this heartache from these jobs that I didn't get to fully grieve because with COVID, people weren't gathering, people weren't seeing each other. I felt like there was no closure. I didn't get a send-off. I didn't get a thank you. I didn't get anything. It just felt like this peace out, all this work you did, all this business you created, all these people, these customers, these guests that loved me, gone. And anytime someone from that industry would reach out, because I wasn't at the restaurants that summer or that winter, I would have different guests reach out asking other servers for my phone number. Can I reach out to her? Like, is she okay? And they would reach out to me, and I'd have a great conversation or exchange some text messages, tell them I'm doing great. Yeah, it's wonderful. And then I'd get off the phone and I would just bawl. Because it was that validation, that acknowledgement that someone actually missed me and thought I did a good job and wanted to tell me. And that was beautiful. And so I'm in yachting. A little how-to. In yachting, you have to make a CV. So instead of a resume, you make what's called a CV. You actually have to put your picture on it. A lot of times they won't hire people or even call you back if your picture is not on it. I feel like it's totally illegal in the country, but for whatever reason, this industry gets away with it. Basically because, like I said, you won't get a job. People just won't call you back if they don't see what you look like. And yeah, your CV is kind of, for me, I had a lot of hospitality experience on there, but no boat experience. So I was starting as what's called green crew. And I made the mistake of not negotiating a bigger salary because I had so much land experience. I should have had a higher salary starting out. And everyone kept saying it's really hard to break in the industry. It's really hard as green crew. It's really hard. Everyone kept saying this, that I was meeting in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I had to take some safety courses, STCW, where they teach you like fire and first aid and talk about boat safety and all kinds of stuff. So you have to take a safety course. You have to get a medical, it's called an ENG1, and it's just to show that you're physically fit for duty on a boat. And I did that. And so the people that were telling me it's really hard as green crew and to get into the industry and get a job were these people at these places doing the courses, these safety courses to get you into yachting. And then there's a bunch of agencies. So you sign up with agencies it was COVID, so you couldn't meet in person. So I feel like that was hard because it's hard to read a piece of paper about someone and know what they're like, how they speak, how they look, how they feel, energy, right? It's all about energy. And I put out this CV, and I looked good on paper because I had so much hospitality, high-end hospitality, luxury hospitality. However, no one could see my personality, and I was a bit older than most of the people getting into the industry. Most of the green crew is in their 20s. So it was a really weird entry into the industry. However, I felt like I got really lucky when this boat called me and they wanted me, because I had all the skills, the hospitality, the diving, and I had been to Thailand. I had been to all these places, so they knew that I was competent in travel and things like that. And they hired me, and there was the question of salary, but everyone kept telling me, well, you're a green crew, so you're not going to make that much money. And I listened to them. I listened to the wrong people again. And I didn't ask for more. I settled for like the bottom of the salary pool. And it was so awful because that first year in yachting, I was so resentful, and I was angry. I was grieving the jobs that I had left. I had been making probably double, maybe even triple, maybe not quite triple in Jackson. So I literally took I was making a third of the pay, half to a third of the pay in yachting, and yachting's supposed to be this next echelon of service and standards, and yet I'm making nothing. And looking back, that was my fault, because I didn't advocate for myself. I didn't ask for more. And I'm going to say this, as a woman, we're not taught to ask for more. We're not taught to negotiate salaries. We're not taught how to have those conversations. I feel like we're taught to just get what we get, and we don't throw a fit. And so again, that first year, I was very angry. I was resentful. I was grieving the loss of my old jobs. And I was also dealing with working environments that were so new. So at a restaurant, you work for 4, 6, 8 hours. If you're working a double, you're working like 12 to 16 hours. And you go home at the end of the night. And you get to say goodbye to everyone, whereas on a yacht, you're living with the crew. So you're going to bed, you're usually sharing a room with another crew member. You're sharing a bathroom with another crew member. You're eating together if you get time to eat. You're scuba diving together. You're docking the boat together. You're getting the toys ready. You're doing all these things. You're doing all these things together. And it's COVID, so we're also spending all our off time together, if there's any off time. Sometimes you have, if you work, which I did, on a private charter boat, you sometimes have a quick turnaround. Now, we didn't do this, which was nice, but I heard about boats that did 24-hour turnaround. So literally, guests would get off the boat at, say, 1 p.m. in the afternoon on Friday, and then the next guest would get on board the next morning, Saturday. So in that 24 hours, again, thankfully, I didn't have to do this, but other boats did. You're cleaning the whole boat. You're changing all the linens. You're washing everything. You're re-provisioning for the week, meaning you're buying, snacks and sodas and whatever this new group wants, and getting the whole boat back to perfect before the next guests come. So you're working obviously side by side with the other crew members to get the boat turned over. If you have time off, especially during COVID, you weren't allowed to really hang out with other people because, nobody wanted to spread COVID. So in Bahamas, we had all like quarantined when we got to the country or had, COVID tests done and following all the rules that we had to do to be in the country. But even, even hanging out with other crew members or other people, we were trying to keep 6 feet distance and all of that. And so most of the time we were hanging out with each other, and it's a lot. And I realized kind of too late in that first year that I need my alone time. I need to take time for myself and do the things that keep me healthy and keep me happy. And that first year was a really hard adjustment for me because I didn't realize how much I recharge in solitude, how much I need solitude to really ground myself and get back to normal me and not be crabby me or irritated, upset, emotional. I need time away from other people's energy to really get back into my own energy. So that first year was really difficult. And then the second year, once I got the pace, once I got the rhythm, once I got the pay raise, I felt like I had a good routine, I had a good rhythm, and I was starting to like the industry. However, it's hard to explain different boats do different things differently, and I really wanted to travel more. We had just spent 2 years essentially just in the Bahamas and Florida area, and so by year 2, middle of year 2, it's kind of like, okay, we've done this dive site, we've done this place, we've been here, done that, and I was just ready to do more. I wanted to go further afield. I wanted to experience more places, different cultures, and so realizing that the boat I was on and the crew I was working with, that might not happen. And I just ended up working with a travel company. And it was funny because I had been told so many times to run my own trips when I was taking people to Thailand. People were like, you should start running trips, or you should start doing retreats. And it just seemed so daunting. And so I ended up working with this travel company and learning so much about running trips and guiding groups, and got to go further afield. And that experience of just being able to not be... So it's interesting because I want to be in one place long enough to learn the culture, the language, all of that stuff. And also, I want to see all these other places around the world. Now that I've seen so many places, it's like I just want to go more and more and more. And so my third year in yachting, I was working as freelance, which instead of working full-time on a yacht year-round, I was what's called freelance. So if people needed help, they could call me and I would go work for them. And thankfully at this point I had made a few friends with a few different crews and captains, and so I got a call. I got called up to do some freelance work, and then I was working for this travel company, and I got to run a few trips with them. I got to run a few trips for them, and I was doing admin work, so I was testing the waters of working remotely and really enjoying that and really loving the freedom of being able to work wherever I was, and loving the freedom of kind of making my own hours. And as time went on, freelancing on yachts and working for the travel company was becoming more and more difficult because the travel company was really growing and getting bigger and more popular and having a lot more guests. And I was basically guest service. I was on the guest service end of it and working remotely and doing some trips. I wanted to do more trips. That was the thing is admin work is easy for me. It's just not very enjoyable. And so I was really hoping to do more trips and more travel and guiding groups and leading. And I feel like the position was going more towards admin and not being as remote, being more in one location. And so it's just one of those things where I had this kind of vision in my head about where I wanted to go in this line of work. And I was like, this is my dream job. I'm so excited. When I first started it, in that year 3 of yachting. And again, as things progressed over the last 3 years, I was hoping to do less yachting, more travel with the travel company, less admin, more travel with the travel company. And it's just not how things work. You know, when companies are building and getting bigger, they need you where they need you. And I was so good at admin and guest service that I feel like they needed more of that and less of the other stuff. So, you know, jobs evolve and change, and it just wasn't, I was feeling that desire again, like things just weren't quite aligning. And I really was like trying to listen to that and making sure I didn't get to a place again where, like I was in Missoula, where I was just so miserable trying to fit into this box of what, you know, life was trying to put me in and where my desires were headed. My desires were headed this way. And yachting and this travel company, you know, that was kind of heading the other way. And so I really had to sit down and be like, what is going on with me? Because it wasn't filling my cup. And I decided last year to take a step back from all of it. You know, hospitality was getting really draining. I was finding myself not enjoying it as much as I had enjoyed it in the past. And I really, especially for guest service and when you're working with clients and guests and yacht owners and charter guests, you want to give them the best experience ever. And I know from past experiences that sometimes when I'm not in my best mindset or my best, just at my best, then I'm not giving as good a service and I'm not giving the kind of experiences that I know I can give to people. And so I chose to walk away completely. And it was the hardest decision I had to make. It literally broke my heart. I've spent the last year grieving that walk away and feeling like this, almost sometimes feeling like this programming in me that, oh, I could have made it work. I should have made it work. I should have just kept going, even though I wasn't fully, aligned with it, even though I wasn't fully feeling great about everything. I should have just kept going. And I know after months and months of realizing my patterns, realizing my people pleasing, and realizing that when I'm not aligned, when I'm not really doing something I love, and I was doing things I love, I'm telling you, like yachting and travel and working with a travel company, I was doing things I loved, but it wasn't bringing me the kind of joy that I know I felt in the beginning. And again, I didn't want guest experience I want to be able to give my all to the guest experience. And so walking away was also a way for me to make room for someone else to give that guest experience that I wasn't at 100% doing. And so since I walked away from all that last October, at first I was kind of flailing because there's this part of me and my money story that's, you work until you retire. You can't take a day off. You can't take a month off, and I kind of switched that script when I lived in Jackson and did seasonal work. But then working in yachting and then traveling, I was doing, when I was traveling for work, I was like, well, this is vacation, but it wasn't vacation. I needed, like, in yachting, when I was saying I need time alone and by myself and doing things I love, that's vacation, and I need a lot of that. And I realized at first, when I didn't have a job anymore, jobs plural, when I didn't have jobs anymore, I had this, I don't want to say panic, but it was, I can't just not work. That's not okay. I can't just not work. I have to do something. So I ended up working with some friends of mine, helping them get a yacht ready for their owner. It was great. It was a nice, like, kind of part-time segue into not working. And again, just following the breadcrumbs of what life's put in front of me, I got asked to do some pet sitting in Hawaii at the beginning of the year. And that's when I started these videos, is at the beginning of the year. And I thought, I'm going to document this. I'm going to document this year that I really have no plans. Most of the time in my life, anytime I've left a place, left a job, left a partner, left a friend, left an environment, I've had a plan. I've had, okay, it's time for me to move on, and now I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go be here, or I'm going to put my time and energy into this thing after I took it out of this thing. And I literally had no plan. And so a friend of mine asked me to come pet sit in Hawaii, and I got to slow all the way down. Like, not just working remotely, part-time, slow down. Like, I was literally not working. And it's so funny that I started these videos then, because I'm still at the core a producer. Like, I have to keep producing no matter what. So even though I wasn't working, I was still making videos and producing something. And I was brainstorming ideas for business ideas and running my own trips and things I could do for other people and their businesses and help them out here and there. And finally, after taking care of these pets for a couple weeks, I realized I really need to just take care of myself. I haven't had the time or given myself the time to really just take care of myself, not take care of anyone else, not take care of guests, not take care of, not that I take care of family members or friends, but, like, even just holding space for other people, there's energy involved in that. And I was like, I really need to just, like, take all my energy and keep it here, keep it just in this space. And I really had this desire to be taken care of. And I had to really think about that, because even taking care of animals, it can be work. It can be a lot of work. It can be a little bit of work, but it's still, you're responsible for another being. And I realized, I was like, I don't want to be responsible for anyone else. In fact, I want to be kind of cared for in a way. And that was when I made the decision to go to Bali. I thought, okay, I really want to do diving, like, on my blank canvas that started in my 20s, that now has all these, like, dots filled in and places filled in. I've been wanting to dive some of these remote locations in the world, and being in Indonesia and Bali makes those points more accessible. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Bali and I'm going to do some diving by myself, where I'm not responsible for anyone else. I'm not responsible for anything else. I just have to show up. I just can show up and be here and enjoy this experience. And I get to Bali and I literally, that's not what my mind or my body wanted. My mind and body wanted to literally just rest. Just rest. And being there and being in Bali for the third time, actually, I was in Bali for the third time, I really got to do what I talked about in college and what I talked about graduating college, and wanting to do that travel and wanting to live in a place and learn the culture and start to learn the language and start to become a part of the community. And that's what I got to do. And it's just so interesting that wasn't the objective. That wasn't the reason I went there. But it became the thing that I had been wanting and desiring to do since college. I finally did it. I finally lived in another country long enough to build a community and observe and learn. And I've been making these videos and I've been talking about their culture and their community and all the things I've been learning along the way. So that's how I've gotten here. That's how I've gotten to this point. And if you've been along for this ride or are just meeting me for the first time, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's been beautiful. It's been challenging. It's like this contraction and then expansion and contraction and expansion of just my mind, my heart, my soul, everything just needing this break to realign and readjust and become who I am meant to be in this life. And so I thank you for being here. I thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you haven't watched any other video except this one, again, welcome. If you've been here a while, I'm so grateful for your time and energy taking to watch these. I hope that some of these stories help other people realize that it doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be what like our town says is how you do life, because everywhere in the world, everyone's doing life differently. And I hope moving forward, I get to experience more places and more people doing life differently and sharing that with everyone and creating a life that I truly feel is meant for me. And I hope that you're creating the life that's truly meant for you. So I thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day. That's my story for today.